The message appeared on my screen at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. Your session has expired. Please contact your system administrator. I clicked to refresh, thinking it was just a temporary system glitch or network error. The message appeared again, blocking my entire screen. Then again. My cursor froze completely, unresponsive to any clicks. The spreadsheet I'd been meticulously updating for 3 weeks straight, the comprehensive financial report due to the board tomorrow morning at 9, vanished right before my eyes. My stomach dropped hard, that sinking feeling of something terribly wrong. Across the open office floor, my boss Ronan Hale leaned casually against the glass wall of the main conference room, laughing easily with the CFO, Gerald Vance. The same CFO whose signature appeared repeatedly on the questionable transactions in the fraud report I'd been quietly, carefully preparing for the last month. Before I could stand up from my desk or call the IT help desk, my work phone buzzed loudly with an automated corporate message. Effective immediately, your system access has been revoked pending compliance review. Please await further instructions. Then I saw them approaching. 2 security officers in dark suits appeared beside my desk, their expressions professionally blank and carefully neutral. Lowry Keane. One asked quietly, almost apologetically, keeping his voice low. We need to collect your security badge and escort you from the building immediately. I stared at him, heat crawling up my throat and spreading across my face. My heart pounded. I'm not under any investigation, I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. There must be some mistake here. But Ronan's voice cut smoothly across the floor, calm and commanding, with that tone that always made people listen and obey. Just a temporary compliance measure, Lowry. Standard corporate protocol for sensitive audits. Nothing to worry about. He smiled at me like we were old friends sharing a private joke, like this was all routine and normal. That's when it hit me hard, like a physical blow. He'd orchestrated this deliberately and carefully. He wasn't protecting the company from fraud. He was protecting himself from what I'd discovered in those files. And I was the threat he needed eliminated immediately, removed before I could tell anyone what I knew. They escorted me out like I'd committed a serious federal crime, not just been an employee doing her job. People stared from their cubicles and desks, pretending not to watch but clearly watching everything unfold. I could see it written plainly on their faces: confusion, fear, curiosity, shock, the beginning of gossip that would spread through the office within hours. As the elevator doors closed, my reflection stared back at me in the polished steel panels, pale, furious, completely humiliated, and utterly powerless. My security badge was deactivated before I even reached the underground parking garage. The red light on the exit scanner confirmed it. Access denied. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white and my fingers ached, watching my entire career dissolve in a single morning. 8 years of dedication and hard work, countless late nights and weekends, perfect performance reviews every single year, all gone in 15 minutes. Then my personal phone vibrated in my purse with an automated system alert I hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Consultant access notification. Legacy login credentials verified at 15:47. Session active. For a second, I couldn't breathe properly. That account shouldn't even exist anymore in any system. I'd been promoted from external consultant to full-time permanent employee 3 years ago. Standard procedure meant they should have deleted those temporary consultant credentials immediately. But apparently, someone in IT had forgotten. And that small administrative oversight was about to change everything completely. 3 years earlier, before my promotion to senior compliance analyst, I'd worked as an external consultant for exactly 6 months. My specific task had been designing the company's entire audit system from the ground up, a comprehensive digital structure that automatically logged every single transaction, user change, permission modification, and access request across the entire corporate network. Back then, I'd been genuinely proud of that system. I'd built it specifically to protect people like me, to create absolute transparency and unbreakable accountability. When I typed those old consultant credentials into my personal laptop that evening, sitting at my kitchen table, I honestly didn't expect them to work at all. But the login screen accepted them immediately without any security challenges. The screen glowed blue. The complete audit database opened before me, Every file and folder perfectly accessible, organized exactly as I designed it. And my name, my old consultant identification code, sat quietly in the upper right corner of the interface. I was still in the system. Still had full administrative access to everything. Every file. Every log. Every transaction record. I told myself I'd just look around briefly, understand why I'd been cut off so suddenly without warning or explanation. But what I found in those first 10 minutes made my blood run cold and my hands shake. I wasn't planning to do anything illegal or stupid. No revenge plots. No tampering with financial data. No breaking federal laws. But I physically couldn't look away from what I was seeing on the screen. The first thing I checked was my own access log, trying to understand exactly why my credentials had been suddenly revoked that afternoon. The timestamp showed that Ronan himself had personally approved the restriction at 3:07 p.m., 8 minutes before my screen locked. He'd done it manually through the administrator panel, not through standard HR or IT channels. Then I saw another entry that made my heart race and my mouth go dry. Override authorization, Q4 compliance review, quarterly totals adjusted manually. Source R. Hale. The entry belonged to Ronan's personal administrator account, the one with the highest level of system privileges. And below it, a hidden comment note that shouldn't have been visible to regular users. Adjust all variance figures before board review tomorrow morning. Keep all discrepancies under 3% variance threshold to avoid audit flags. I stared at those words, reading them over and over, making sure I understood correctly. He wasn't just being slightly unethical or cutting a few corners. He was actively, deliberately falsifying the financial reports I'd been preparing. The quarterly reports that would go directly to the board of directors. The reports with my name attached as the primary analyst and preparer. If those numbers were wrong, if fraud was discovered later, my name would be the first one investigators looked at. He was setting me up to take the fall. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in my entire career. I came back to the office building, not as an employee with access rights, but as a ghost observer. I didn't go inside or try to badge through security. Instead, I sat in the small cafe directly across the street with my laptop open on a corner table, using their free public Wi-Fi network. Every morning at exactly 9 o'clock, Ronan would walk confidently past those glass entrance doors, his power and authority radiating visibly to everyone around him. I used to genuinely admire that presence and confidence. Now I saw it clearly for what it really was, performance art masking corruption. I wasn't ready to strike back or expose him yet. I just wanted to understand the complete truth. And my old consultant login was quietly recording everything in the background, automatically logging every change he made, every file he modified, every transaction he altered. I watched the audit trails grow longer each day. Each entry was another piece of evidence. Another nail in the coffin he was steadily building for himself. 2 days after my forced exit from the building, I received a formal email from Human Resources with official corporate letterhead. Please refrain from discussing the circumstances of your employment termination with current employees, former employees, or any external parties. Violation of this directive may result in legal action. Termination, not suspension. Not administrative leave pending investigation. Termination, complete and final. No hearing. No explanation. No chance to defend myself or present my side. Just absolute silence and a closed door. Ronan had made it look like I'd deliberately mishandled sensitive financial data or violated serious compliance protocols. He was systematically burying me alive professionally, destroying my reputation before I could fight back. That night, I opened the audit logs again with shaking hands and a racing heart. I found something that made everything click into place like puzzle pieces. Over the previous 6 months, starting in March, he had systematically reallocated over $400,000 in small increments to various shell vendor accounts labeled simply as Vendor A12, Vendor B07, and Vendor C19. I searched the entire corporate vendor database carefully, checking every registration and contract. None of those vendors existed anywhere. Not in accounts payable. Not in procurement. Not in contracts. The money had simply vanished into thin air, disappearing into accounts that led nowhere. I didn't lash out emotionally or act impulsively based on anger. Instead, I documented everything with methodical, careful precision. Every modified database entry with before and after values. Every fraudulent transaction with dates and amounts. Every false invoice with forged signatures and fake vendor information. I exported them all into an encrypted file stored safely on 3 separate backup drives. I made absolutely no edits. No interference. No manipulation of any data. Just the pure truth, exactly as it appeared in the system logs with original timestamps perfectly intact. I wasn't planning to break the system or hack anything illegally. I was simply going to let the system itself break him. The system I'd personally built and designed. The system created specifically to catch exactly this kind of fraud. Ronan had made one critical, fatal mistake. He'd completely forgotten who had created the very tools and systems he was now using to commit his crimes. A week later, my former co-worker Thea called me secretly from her personal cell phone, not the office line. "Lori, I really shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered nervously, clearly looking around to make sure no one was listening. "But they're promoting him tomorrow morning. Chief Operating Officer. The board is announcing it at the quarterly meeting in the main conference room." My hand tightened hard around my phone. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. He'd cut me off specifically to protect his rapid ascent up the corporate ladder. I'd been getting too close to discovering his systematic fraud. I was the only person who could stop his promotion with evidence. I smiled faintly, staring out my apartment window at the city lights. "That's actually good news," I said calmly, my voice steady. "He absolutely deserves the spotlight and recognition." Thea sounded genuinely confused by my response. "You're not angry about being fired? About him taking credit for your work?" "No," I said honestly, truthfully. "I'm not angry at all anymore. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. The night before the big board meeting, I logged into my consultant account one final time. The audit system had a built-in automation tool I'd personally programmed years ago for generating quarterly compliance reviews. It automatically created comprehensive summaries of all financial activity and emailed them directly to the entire board under the Chief Compliance Officer's official credentials. The system ran on a preset schedule I'd established during the original setup. I adjusted just one small parameter in the code, include all active consultant accounts in distribution list. That single change meant my findings would go directly to every board member simultaneously. No filter. No preliminary review by Ronan first. Just raw data delivered straight to the top. At exactly 6 o'clock the next morning, the automated report dispatched itself to every board member's inbox simultaneously. The subject line read, "Critical alert, unauthorized transactions detected, prepared by L. Keane, Consultant Access Review." The report contained everything I'd found. Every falsified entry. Every shell vendor. Every missing dollar. All presented in clean tables with timestamps, source documents, and complete audit trails. By 8 o'clock that morning, the entire executive floor was awake and panicking. I sat in the cafe across the street, sipping coffee and watching through the large windows as chaos unfolded. Emergency phone calls. Rushed meetings. People running between offices. Security guards appearing. And at the center of it all, Ronan, trying desperately to contain the spreading fire. I watched from my usual table by the cafe window as Ronan stormed into the building at 8:30. Phone pressed to his ear. Jaw clenched tight. Face red with rage or fear or both. His confident walk had become rushed and uncertain. He knew something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. By noon, the entire IT department was swarming the compliance office, checking servers and examining access logs. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, security had locked down the entire network and started formally interviewing staff members one by one. And by 5 o'clock, Ronan was escorted out by those same security officers who'd removed me just days earlier. Only his walk was slower, more visible, more humiliating. People didn't just glance and look away. They stared openly, whispered immediately, pulled out phones to text the news to colleagues. I sipped my coffee slowly and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just quiet emptiness. The next day, I received an official call from the internal audit department. Ms. Keane, we found your name attached to the compliance report sent to the board yesterday. We need to understand your involvement and role. I told them the complete truth calmly. I hadn't edited any data, hadn't leaked confidential information, hadn't interfered with any systems maliciously. The audit system had generated the report automatically based on its original programming. My old consultant credentials were still valid in the system. Nobody had ever properly deactivated them. I simply hadn't told anyone they still existed. Did you access the system after your termination? The auditor asked carefully, choosing his words. I accessed a system I was legally authorized to access, I replied. My credentials were never formally revoked. Technically true, legally accurate, completely defensible. Days passed in strange silence. Nobody contacted me again. I thought perhaps it was over, that they'd decided to handle everything internally. Then a small article appeared buried in the business section of the local newspaper. Executive placed on administrative leave following financial irregularities at tech firm. No names mentioned. No specific details provided. But I knew. I knew exactly who it was and what it meant. The investigation had gone public. There was no covering it up now. 2 weeks after everything exploded, I received an unexpected message through my LinkedIn profile. A rival company, one of the biggest and most respected firms in the industry, wanted to discuss a potential position. We've heard you have exceptional compliance expertise, the recruiter wrote professionally. We'd love to talk about opportunities here. When I walked into their modern glass building for the interview, the HR director smiled warmly and shook my hand firmly. We like people who stay calm under extreme pressure, she said meaningfully, holding my gaze. People who understand that systems are only as good as the integrity behind them. I realized then that my professional reputation hadn't been destroyed at all. If anything, it had been enhanced dramatically. A week after that interview, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lowry. Ronan's voice, low and controlled but with an edge of desperation. We need to talk. This situation. I hung up immediately without saying a single word. 2 minutes later, he left a voicemail. His voice had changed, lost that smooth confidence. You think you're safe? You think this is over? You don't understand what you've done to me. What you've cost me. Oh, I understood perfectly. I'd simply followed the rules, the same rules he'd forgotten existed. The same rules he'd thought didn't apply to him. The company's board of directors announced an external forensic investigation. Major accounting firm. Federal compliance review. Independent auditors. The works. It turned out Ronan's fraud extended much further than even I'd discovered. Multiple quarters. Multiple years. Multiple shell accounts. Nearly $2 million missing. His signature appeared on hundreds of falsified documents. Mine didn't appear anywhere except on the legitimate compliance reports. The same reports he'd tried to bury by terminating me. One by one, Ronan's allies and supporters began turning on him publicly. Thea texted me one evening. They found over 20 shell vendors. Legal department is completely involved. Federal investigators came today and spent 6 hours interviewing people. He's completely done. I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt triumphant. But mostly, I just felt quiet. Peaceful. Like a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. 2 weeks later, I received another unexpected call, this time from the company's new compliance director. Ms. Keane, she said professionally. I've spent the last week reviewing the audit system you designed 3 years ago. It's brilliant. Comprehensive. Exactly what this company needs going forward. If you're interested in returning, we'd like to discuss it. I hesitated for a long moment. I'll need to think about it carefully. Of course, she replied. Take your time. But know that we understand what really happened here. And we value integrity. The story finally broke publicly that Friday morning. Front page of the business section, corporate fraud scandal, Executive faces termination and federal investigation. There was a photo accompanying the article. Ronan Hale in an expensive navy suit, smiling confidently at some corporate event. He looked so much smaller now, like a man whose carefully constructed mask had finally shattered completely. The article detailed the missing money, the shell accounts, the falsified reports. My name appeared once, former analyst whose termination preceded the discovery. Ronan emailed me one final time. The message was short: I shouldn't have cut you out. You were too good at your job. That was my mistake. I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it permanently without replying. Because the truth was simple and clear, I didn't destroy him. His own system did. The system I'd built specifically to catch fraud. The system he'd trusted to hide his crimes. The system he'd forgotten I still had access to. I accepted the position at the rival firm as their new head of compliance. On my first day, I walked into my spacious corner office. Sunlight spilled across the desk. Modern computer. Clean space. Fresh start. The compliance system they currently used? Almost identical to the one I'd designed. They'd actually modeled it after mine after hearing about its effectiveness. We want you to improve it, my new boss said. Make it even better. I smiled. I can do that. 3 months into my new position, I was invited to present at the annual National Compliance Conference. My presentation topic: Building Integrity Systems that Protect Organizations and Individuals. The audience filled a massive ballroom. Compliance officers from hundreds of companies. When I finished, they gave me a standing ovation. During the question period, a business journalist in the back row raised her hand. You were the consultant behind the Linton Industries case, weren't you? The one who exposed the fraud. I smiled carefully. I built a system designed to reveal truth. The system did its job exactly as intended. Ronan was formally indicted 6 months after my termination. Federal charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying corporate records. The company released a public statement expressing regret and commitment to transparency. The board stripped him of all titles, benefits, and stock options. Everything he'd stolen and manipulated to climb higher became the evidence that brought him down. The ladder he'd built from fraud collapsed completely beneath him. Almost a year later, I received a handwritten letter forwarded through my lawyer. It was from Ronan's former executive assistant, a woman named Patricia. She'd lost her job when he was terminated. He talked about you often after everything fell apart, she wrote in careful handwriting. He said you were dangerous because you saw everything and remembered everything. He said you were the only person who truly understood how the systems worked. He was right about that. He just didn't realize it would destroy him. Standing in my office one quiet evening, I logged into our compliance system one final time that day. The screen flickered softly, waiting for input. I opened a new audit report template and typed a single summary line. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself through systems built on integrity. Then I saved the file, closed the program, and logged out. As I gathered my things to leave, I looked at the framed certificate on my wall. Excellence in Compliance Systems Design. I'd earned it the year after designing that original audit system. The system Ronan had used to commit fraud. The system that had ultimately caught him. The system I'd built specifically to protect people like me. It had worked exactly as designed. I smiled, turned off the lights, and went home. My career wasn't over when Ronan cut off my access. It was just beginning. And this time, I was building it on my own terms, with my own power, using my own voice. He tried to erase me from the system. Instead, the system had erased him. And I'd moved on to build something better, something honest, something that would last. That was the real victory. Not his destruction, but my reconstruction. 6 months into my new role, I received an invitation to join a federal task force on corporate compliance. They wanted my expertise on building fraud detection systems. I accepted. The work was challenging and important. I helped design protocols that would protect thousands of employees from what had happened to me. My team grew. Talented people who believed in transparency and accountability. People who understood that systems weren't just about catching criminals. They were about protecting honest workers. We built tools that other companies adopted. My reputation spread throughout the industry. Speaking engagements, consulting offers, board positions. Everything Ronan had tried to take from me, I'd built back stronger. One afternoon, I received a call from a reporter working on a long-form article about corporate fraud. "I've been researching the Linton Industries case," she said. "Your name keeps coming up. People call you the architect of modern compliance systems." I laughed softly. "I just built a system that tells the truth." "That's exactly what makes it revolutionary," she replied. The article published 3 months later. It detailed Ronan's fraud, my termination, and the system that caught him. But it also explored something deeper: how technology could be designed with ethics at its core. How systems could protect the vulnerable instead of empowering the corrupt. The article went viral in business circles. My LinkedIn exploded with connection requests. Job offers arrived daily. But I was happy where I was, building something meaningful. 2 years after everything happened, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee on corporate fraud prevention. I sat in that formal room, facing senators and cameras, and told my story. Not for revenge. Not for attention. But because other people needed to know they weren't powerless. That systems could be allies. That truth had power. "Ms. Keene," one senator asked, "what would you say to other employees who discover fraud but fear retaliation?" I looked directly at the camera. "Document everything. Trust the systems designed to protect you. And remember, the truth doesn't need your permission to exist. It just needs a pathway to light." The room erupted in applause. Later, dozens of people reached out. Employees facing similar situations. Whistleblowers afraid to come forward. I helped where I could, connecting them with resources, explaining their rights, sometimes just listening. 3 years after my termination, I stood on a stage accepting an award for ethics in technology. The presenter read my biography, the fraud I'd uncovered, the system I'd built, the lives I'd protected. As I held that crystal trophy, I thought about that Tuesday afternoon when my screen went dark. How terrified I'd felt. How powerless. I would never have imagined this future. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "This award belongs to every person who's ever been silenced for telling the truth. Every employee who's been terminated for doing the right thing. Every whistleblower who chose integrity over comfort." I paused, looking out at hundreds of faces. Ronan Hale thought cutting my access would end my story. Instead, it began it. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I saw your speech. You destroyed my life." Ronan. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed a single response. "No. You destroyed your own life. I just refused to let you destroy mine." I blocked the number and never heard from him again. Sometimes I wondered what became of him. Then I'd remember. It didn't matter. His story ended the day he chose fraud over integrity. Mine continued. 5 years later, I published a book, The Integrity Algorithm, Building Systems That Protect Truth. It became required reading in business schools across the country. Young professionals reached out constantly, asking questions, seeking guidance. I mentored dozens of analysts, teaching them what I'd learned. Not just about systems and code, but about courage. About standing firm when power tries to silence you. About building a career on truth rather than compromise. My consulting firm grew to 30 employees. We specialized in helping companies build transparent systems. Every client got the same message. We design systems that make fraud impossible and truth inevitable. On the 7th anniversary of my termination, I received a package at my office. Inside was a newspaper clipping from a small business journal. The headline read, "Former executive sentenced to 8 years for corporate fraud." Ronan's face stared up from the page, older now, worn down. The article detailed his trial, conviction, and sentencing. Multiple counts. Millions in restitution. I read it once, then filed it away. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It had never really been about him at all. It was about me, about discovering that powerlessness was an illusion. That systems could be weapons of justice. That one person with truth and courage could change everything. That evening, I updated my LinkedIn profile with a simple line: I build systems that protect the truth-tellers. Within an hour, I had 50 new messages from people who needed help. Standing in my office late one evening, I looked at the wall of achievements. Awards. Certificates. Photos with senators and CEOs. Published articles. My book on the shelf. None of it would exist if Ronan hadn't cut off my access that Tuesday afternoon. His betrayal had been the catalyst for everything good in my life now. I thought about emailing him in prison, telling him that his worst act had created my best life. But I didn't. Because he didn't deserve any more of my time or energy. I opened my laptop one final time and logged into the compliance system, the new version, improved and expanded. The screen glowed softly, ready for tomorrow's work. Somewhere in the code I'd written years ago, there was a comment visible only to system administrators, built by L. Keane. Truth is the only sustainable system. I smiled, closed the laptop, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, I'd help another company build integrity into their foundation. Tomorrow, I'd mentor another young analyst afraid to speak up. Tomorrow, I'd continue building a career on the only thing that mattered, truth. Ronan had tried to cut off my access. Instead, he'd given me access to a future I'd never imagined. That was justice. That was victory. That was enough.